Officer James Brennan woke up on the wrong side of the bed that Thursday morning. His coffee maker broke, spilling grounds all over his kitchen counter. Then his car barely started in the cold weather. By noon, he'd already handed out 12 tickets and broken up a fight outside the high school. "Attention all units in the downtown area," crackled his radio. "Shoplifting reported at Westfield Mall. Suspect is a young woman, early 20s, blue jeans, dark hair, white jacket. Security says she's hit 3 stores already today." James grabbed the radio. "Unit 17 responding. ETA 5 minutes." The mall buzzed with afternoon shoppers, mothers pushing strollers, teenagers hanging out after school, old folks walking laps in comfortable shoes. James scanned the crowd, his tired eyes searching for the suspect. That's when he spotted her, 19-year-old Sophia Mitchell, walking out of a jewelry store. Dark hair, white jacket, blue jeans. She carried a small shopping bag and checked her phone, completely unaware of what was about to happen. James didn't hesitate. He didn't verify with mall security. He didn't check if she matched the full description. He just saw what he expected to see. "Police, stop right there," he called out, striding toward her. Sophia looked up, confused. She glanced behind her, thinking he must be talking to someone else. "Me?" she asked, pointing to herself. "Put your hands where I can see them," James ordered, his voice sharp enough to make nearby shoppers stop and stare. "There must be some mistake," Sophia said, her voice rising with panic. "I didn't do anything." But James was already pulling out his handcuffs. "Turn around," he demanded. "Wait, please," Sophia pleaded, her eyes wide with fear. "I just bought a gift for my mom. The receipt's in the bag." The growing crowd of onlookers made James more determined. He couldn't back down now. In front of all these people, he had to look in control. "You can explain downtown," he said, roughly spinning her around and clicking the handcuffs onto her wrists. The small shopping bag dropped to the floor, its contents spilling out, a silver bracelet still in its box, with the receipt taped to the top. A middle-aged woman in the crowd gasped. "Is this really necessary?" she asked. "She's just a girl." "Mind your own business, ma'am," James snapped. Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as James began marching her through the mall. People pulled out their phones, recording everything. A group of teenage girls whispered behind their hands. A security guard watched from a distance, frowning with concern. "Please," Sophia tried again, her voice trembling. "You've made a mistake. I'm not a shoplifter. Call the store. They'll tell you I paid for everything." "Save it," James said, tightening his grip on her arm. "I've heard every excuse in the book." "Can I at least see some ID?" asked Sophia. "Don't you need to confirm who I am?" James ignored her. In his mind, the case was open and shut. Dark hair, white jacket, female. Case closed. What Officer Brennan didn't know, what would soon turn his simple shoplifting arrest into the biggest mistake of his career, was exactly who Sophia Mitchell was. Her father, Thomas Mitchell, wasn't just any concerned parent who would come looking for his daughter. He was Special Agent Thomas Mitchell, a 25-year veteran of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division. A man who'd taken down drug lords and corrupt officials. A man who knew every procedure, every protocol, and exactly what to do when someone ignored them all. As the mall doors closed behind them and James pushed Sophia toward his waiting police car, the clock started ticking on Officer Brennan's career. The police car smelled like pine air freshener trying to cover up something worse. Sophia sat in the back, separated from Officer Brennan by a plastic divider. Her wrists hurt from the tight handcuffs. Worse than the physical pain was the humiliation. People had seen her, recorded her. By tomorrow, it would probably be all over social media. "Can I please make my phone call?" she asked, her voice small in the quiet car. Officer Brennan sighed heavily. "When we get to the station." "I have the right to call someone now," Sophia said, remembering a law class she took last semester. "I know my rights." Brennan muttered something under his breath, but pulled the car into an empty parking lot. He passed his cell phone through a small opening in the divider. "Make it quick," he said. With shaking hands, Sophia dialed the number she knew by heart. The phone rang 3 times before her father answered. "Mitchell," came the crisp, professional voice. "Dad," she whispered, fighting to keep her voice steady. A tear slid down her cheek despite her best efforts. "I'm in trouble. I've been arrested." "What?" The single word carried disbelief and instant concern. "At Westfield Mall. The officer thinks I was shoplifting, but I swear I didn't take anything. I have the receipt and everything." Her words tumbled out faster now. "They put me in handcuffs in front of everyone. People were filming it on their phones." There was a brief silence on the other end. Thomas Mitchell sat at the head of a long conference table at FBI headquarters. 12 agents were in the middle of a briefing about a drug trafficking case when his phone rang. He normally wouldn't have answered, but his daughter always texted first unless it was an emergency. The other agents watched as the color drained from their boss's face. In 15 years of working with him, none had ever seen Special Agent Mitchell lose his composure, not during shootouts, not during hostage situations, not even when he took a bullet in the shoulder during a raid 2 years ago. But now, hearing his daughter's frightened voice, something shifted in his expression. "Which officer?" he asked, his tone controlled but with an edge that made the agents exchange glances. "What precinct?" Sophia looked through the divider at Officer Brennan, who was checking his watch impatiently. "His name tag says Brennan. James Brennan, I think. We haven't gone to the station yet. We're still in his car." The senior FBI agent stood up so abruptly that his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Without a word of explanation to his team, he grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Special Agent Rodriguez, his second-in-command, raised an eyebrow. "Sir, we're in the middle of—" Thomas held up one hand, silencing the room. "Family emergency," he said simply. Then back into the phone. "Sophia, listen to me carefully. Don't answer any questions. Don't sign anything. Don't try to explain yourself to anyone except me. Understand?" "Yes," she whispered. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, he promised, his voice now calm and reassuring for her benefit, though everyone in the conference room could see the cold fury building behind his eyes. "Don't worry. This will be fixed." He ended the call and headed for the door, then paused and turned back to the room of confused agents. "Rodriguez, take over. Chen, I need everything you can find on an Officer James Brennan, local PD. Full background, complaint history, everything. Send it to my phone." "On it," Agent Chen said, already pulling out her laptop. "Sir." Rodriguez called after him. "What's happened?" Thomas Mitchell paused at the doorway, his hand gripping the frame so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Someone just made the biggest mistake of their career," he said quietly. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing rapidly down the hallway. The police station buzzed with the usual afternoon activity. Officers typing reports, phones ringing, the coffee machine gurgling in the corner. Officer Brennan had just sat down with his paperwork when Desk Sergeant Pete Wilson's voice called across the room. "Hey, Brennan, your shoplifting case. There's someone here about it." James didn't look up from his computer. "Tell them to wait. Booking's not done yet." You might want to handle this one personally," Pete insisted, his voice tighter than usual. "Right now." Something in Pete's tone made James look up. The normally relaxed desk sergeant looked nervous, which wasn't like him. 20 years on the job, Pete had seen everything. "What's the problem?" James asked, annoyed at the interruption. Pete lowered his voice. "FBI. Asking specifically for you." "FBI?" James frowned, standing up. What would they want with a simple shoplifting case? As he walked toward the front desk, James noticed how other officers suddenly seemed busy with their computers, stealing glances toward the lobby. Through the glass doors, he could see a man in a dark suit standing with perfect posture, like a soldier at ease but ready for action. The man's FBI credentials hung from his breast pocket, clearly visible. He wasn't trying to be subtle. James pushed through the doors to the lobby. Up close, the FBI agent was even more intimidating. Tall, fit, with short gray hair that suggested military background before the bureau. His face showed nothing, but his eyes tracked James like a hunter watching prey. "Officer James Brennan?" the man asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes, sir. How can I help the FBI today?" James tried to sound confident, professional. "Special Agent Thomas Mitchell." The man's voice was controlled, almost too calm. "I believe you have my daughter in custody." James felt a cold weight drop in his stomach. "Your daughter?" "Sophia Mitchell. 19 years old, brown hair. Arrested approximately 40 minutes ago at Westfield Mall for alleged shoplifting. Each fact delivered like a bullet point in a report. My daughter. The pieces clicked together in James's mind. The girl in the mall. The one who kept insisting they had the wrong person. The one he hadn't bothered to ID properly. Sir, I was responding to a report of a shoplifter matching her description. James began, trying to regain his footing. Standard procedure when? Did you check her ID? Thomas interrupted, his voice still eerily calm. James hesitated. Well, no, but the description. Did you review any security footage before making the arrest? Thomas continued, taking a small step forward. There wasn't time to. Did you interview any witnesses who actually saw her take something? James swallowed hard. The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the civilians waiting on benches were watching now. No, sir, he finally admitted. Did you check for a receipt for the items you assumed she stole? I was going to process that at the station. Thomas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. So to summarize, Officer Brennan, you publicly handcuffed and arrested a young woman without checking her ID, without reviewing available security footage, without interviewing witnesses, and without even checking if she had a receipt for her purchases. Put that way, it sounded bad. Really bad. Where is my daughter now? Thomas asked. Processing, James replied, his mouth suddenly dry. Get her. Now. James nodded and turned toward the back, grateful for any excuse to escape those cold eyes. He'd taken only 3 steps when Thomas spoke again. And Officer Brennan? The FBI agent's voice hadn't changed volume, but somehow it filled the entire lobby. While you're getting her, please inform your commanding officer that I'd like to speak with them as well. From his desk, Sergeant Wilson was already reaching for the phone, his face grim as he dialed the captain's extension. Captain Diane Reynolds arrived within minutes of the call. A 20-year veteran with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense attitude, she'd seen everything from rookie mistakes to deliberate misconduct. She sized up the situation quickly. FBI agent on one side, increasingly nervous Officer Brennan on the other. Special Agent Mitchell, she said, extending her hand. I'm Captain Reynolds. Let's talk in my office. My daughter first, Thomas insisted. Captain Reynolds nodded to a nearby officer. Brown, bring Ms. Mitchell from processing. While they waited, the captain led them to a small conference room off the main floor. The 3 sat in uncomfortable silence until the door opened again. Sophia walked in, still wearing the white jacket from the mall, now wrinkled from her time in the holding cell. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. When she saw her father, her shoulders relaxed slightly. You okay, kiddo? Thomas asked, his professional mask slipping for just a moment. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Captain Reynolds cleared her throat. Now, Special Agent Mitchell, you mentioned evidence. Thomas pulled out his phone. Before I left headquarters, my team sent me several items. First, there's this. He played a video on his screen. The footage, slightly shaky, showed Sophia walking out of the jewelry store, shopping bag in hand. Then Officer Brennan approaching her, the quick argument, and the handcuffing. Shoppers stood around watching, some with phones recording. This was taken by my daughter's friend Lisa, who happened to be at the mall and witnessed the arrest. Thomas explained. She sent it to Sophia's phone, which is currently in your property room. Captain Reynolds watched without comment. Officer Brennan stared at the table. Next, Thomas continued, swiping to another video, is footage from the mall's security system. My office obtained it officially 20 minutes ago. This video, from a higher angle, showed the same scene from a different view. But Thomas paused it and pointed to the corner of the frame. And here, he said, at the exact same time Officer Brennan was arresting my daughter. He zoomed in on a woman hurrying toward a side exit. Dark hair, white jacket, similar to Sophia from a distance, but clearly a different person up close. She carried no shopping bags and kept looking over her shoulder. That's your actual shoplifter, Thomas said. Mall security confirmed she hit 3 stores before leaving. The captain's face darkened. And you're certain this is the same time? Timestamp is in the corner, Thomas replied. While my daughter was being wrongfully arrested, the actual thief walked out completely unchallenged. He swiped again. Here's Sophia's receipt for the bracelet she bought. time-stamped 5 minutes before her arrest, and here's her student ID showing she's on the dean's list at State University. Sophia finally spoke. "I was buying Mom's birthday present," she said quietly. "I saved up from my campus job." Captain Reynolds took a long, slow breath. "Officer Brennan, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Brennan's face had gone from pale to sickly gray. The description matched. Dark hair, white jacket, blue jeans. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "I thought. You didn't think." Thomas cut in, his calm finally cracking. "My daughter has no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. She was handcuffed and paraded through a public place like a criminal based on nothing but a vague description that could match half the young women in that mall." He leaned forward. "Do you know what happens online when innocent people are wrongfully arrested? Those videos don't disappear. They'd follow you forever. Job interviews, dating, college applications. All it takes is one Google search of her name." Captain Reynolds held up her hand. "Special Agent Mitchell, I understand your frustration, and I assure you this matter will be investigated thoroughly." She turned to Officer Brennan. "Wait outside, please." After Brennan left, the captain's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Ms. Mitchell, on behalf of this department, I want to offer our sincere apologies for what happened today." By the next morning, the story had grown legs. Local news picked it up: FBI agent's daughter wrongfully arrested. Social media buzzed with clips of Sophia being led through the mall in handcuffs. Comments ranged from supportive to cruel, as they always do online. Sophia sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with tired eyes. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw people staring at her, phones recording her worst moment. "Maybe you should stay off social media for a few days," her mother Linda suggested, placing a cup of tea beside her. "It doesn't matter if I look or not. It's still out there," Sophia said. "My lab partner texted to ask if I'm the girl from the mall video." Thomas entered the kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear. He'd been making calls since dawn, talking to colleagues, police department contacts, even a lawyer friend who specialized in civil rights violations. "Yes, I understand. Thank you, Captain," he said before ending the call. Linda and Sophia looked up at him expectantly. That was Captain Reynolds. Thomas explained, sitting down heavily. "The department has officially launched an internal investigation into Officer Brennan's conduct." "What does that mean exactly?" Linda asked, squeezing her daughter's hand. "They've placed him on administrative leave while they investigate, standard procedure." Sophia frowned. "Administrative leave? Isn't that just a paid vacation?" Thomas understood her frustration. "It's the first step, Sophia. They need to follow proper procedures just like Brennan should have done with you." "Did you have to pull any strings?" Linda asked. "Call in favors?" Thomas shook his head. "No favors, no threats. The evidence speaks for itself. The videos, your receipt, the mall security footage showing the real shoplifter. Sometimes the system actually works." Sophia didn't look convinced. "So what happens now?" "They'll interview everyone involved. Me, you, Brennan, mall security witnesses. Review all the evidence. It could take a couple weeks." Later that afternoon, Captain Reynolds called again. This time, she asked to speak directly to Sophia, who took the call in her bedroom for privacy. When she came back downstairs 20 minutes later, her parents were waiting in the living room, trying not to look worried. "The captain apologized to me personally," Sophia told them, her expression unreadable. "Said it wasn't how their officers are trained to handle situations. That they're taking it very seriously." Thomas nodded. "Reynolds is good people. I checked her background. 20 years of service, clean record, known for running a tight ship." She asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint to go along with the internal investigation, Sophia continued. "And?" her mother prompted. I said I needed to think about it. Sophia sat down on the couch, tucking her feet under her. "Would it make any difference, Dad? Or would it just drag this out longer?" Thomas chose his words carefully. "A formal complaint creates a permanent record. It means the next time he does something like this, if there is a next time, there's a pattern, not just an isolated incident." "But it also means interviews, maybe even testifying," Linda pointed out. "It's your choice," Thomas assured his daughter. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you." Sophia stared at the blank TV screen, seeing her reflection. I told Captain Reynolds that what happened wasn't just a mistake, it was negligence. It was a violation of my rights. Her voice grew stronger. And I told her I wasn't the first person this has happened to, just the first whose dad happens to be FBI. Thomas felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness that his 19-year-old had to deal with this at all. I'm filing the complaint, Sophia decided, not just for me. 2 weeks crawled by. Sophia tried to focus on classes, but it wasn't easy. Some days were better than others. Sometimes she'd almost forget about what happened, then she'd catch someone whispering as she walked across campus, or notice a classmate quickly close a video on their phone when she approached. Her psychology professor pulled her aside after class one Tuesday. If you need an extension on the paper, just let me know, he said kindly. I heard about what happened. I'm fine, Sophia insisted, clutching her books tighter. She was tired of being that girl from the video. At home that evening, the call they'd been waiting for finally came. Thomas answered, putting it on speaker so Linda and Sophia could hear. The investigation has concluded, Captain Reynolds announced. Her voice sounded tinny through the phone speaker. Officer Brennan was found to have violated multiple departmental policies. Thomas leaned forward. Which policies specifically? Failure to establish probable cause before making an arrest. Improper detention procedures. Neglecting to properly document the initial contact and subsequent arrest. Sophia exchanged glances with her parents. So what happens now? She asked. The department is issuing a formal public apology to you, Sophia, the captain said. It will be released to the press tomorrow morning. And Officer Brennan? Thomas pressed. There was a slight pause before Captain Reynolds continued. 30-day suspension without pay. Mandatory retraining on proper arrest procedures and civil rights. And this incident will be permanently added to his record. Meaning? Linda asked. Meaning it will affect his evaluation scores and chances for future promotion, the captain explained. This isn't just a slap on the wrist, Mrs. Mitchell. After the call ended, the three sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Sophia spoke. That's it. 30 days. He publicly humiliated me, and in a month, he's back on the streets doing the same thing to someone else. Thomas rubbed his forehead. He understood his daughter's frustration. The department followed their procedures, Sophia. They can't fire an officer for a first offense that didn't involve corruption or excessive force. So we just accept this. Sophia's voice rose. What about all those people who don't have an FBI agent for a dad? What happens to them? Thomas looked at his daughter with new eyes. In the midst of this ordeal, something had changed in her. She wasn't just thinking about herself anymore. There is one more option, he said slowly. The department's investigation is internal, but there's also the Civilian Review Board. What's that? Linda asked. Independent oversight. Citizens who review police conduct complaints. Their findings become public record. Thomas turned to his daughter. It would mean telling your story again, possibly in a public hearing. Sophia didn't hesitate. Let's do it. The next few days were busy. Thomas helped Sophia prepare her statement for the Civilian Review Board, using his knowledge of the system without overstepping. He was careful not to pull strings. That wasn't the lesson he wanted to teach his daughter. Local news picked up the story again when the police department's apology was released. This time, the headlines read, Police Department apologizes for wrongful arrest and officer suspended after mall incident. A reporter caught up with Sophia outside her psychology class. How do you feel about the officer's punishment? She asked, shoving a microphone toward Sophia. Sophia looked directly into the camera. This isn't about punishing one officer, she said clearly. It's about changing how officers are trained and held accountable. That's why I filed a complaint with the Civilian Review Board. This needs to be in the public record. As the reporter turned back to the camera, Sophia walked away, head held high. For the first time in 2 weeks, no one was whispering behind her back. Instead, a classmate gave her a thumbs up as she passed. 6 months passed. The leaves changed colors, fell, and winter came and went. Spring brought new beginnings, and for Sophia, a chance to turn her painful experience into something meaningful. The police academy director called her one evening. We want our new officers to hear real stories from real people. Would you share yours? Sophia felt her heart race. The idea of facing a room of future cops made her nervous. But then she thought of other innocent people who might one day be wrongly arrested. "I'll do it," she said. On a sunny Tuesday morning, Sophia stood in front of 60 police cadets in their blue uniforms. Her dad Thomas sat in the back row, a proud smile on his face. Officer Brennan was there too, required to attend as part of his retraining. The room fell silent as Sophia stepped up to the microphone. She took a deep breath. "Last fall, I was just shopping for my mom's birthday gift. Then suddenly, I was in handcuffs, being walked through a crowded mall like a criminal." Her voice shook slightly, but she kept going. "I was scared. I was confused. Nobody would listen to me." She looked at the young faces watching her. Some looked uncomfortable, others leaned forward, really listening. "I'm not here to make you feel bad about being police officers," she continued. "My own dad has worked in law enforcement my whole life. But I am here to remind you that the people you arrest, the people you stop, we're not just cases or suspects. We're somebody's daughter, somebody's son, somebody's parent." A cadet in the front row wiped away a tear. "When you put on that uniform, you carry so much power. How you use it can change someone's whole life, for better or worse." After her talk, cadets lined up to thank her. One young woman gripped Sophia's hand. "My brother was wrongly arrested once. Nobody ever heard his side. Thank you for speaking up." As the crowd thinned out, Officer Brennan approached. He looked different, humbler somehow. The arrogance Sophia remembered from that day at the mall was gone. "I've been wanting to say this face to face," he said, looking straight at her. "I'm truly sorry. I was having a bad day, and I rushed to judgment. That's no excuse." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Your story, it's changed how I approach every stop now. I double-check everything. I listen more." Thomas stood quietly nearby watching. He hadn't wanted revenge, just accountability. As a fellow law enforcement officer, he understood the daily pressures of the job, but also knew the absolute necessity of doing it right. The real test of justice, Thomas finally said to Brennan, isn't about punishing mistakes. It's about learning from them. Make sure no one else goes through what my daughter did. As they walked to the car afterward, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, Sophia turned to her dad.